Hello everyone and welcome to our next episode. Today I'm joined by nurse consultant from Kendal Lymphology Centre, Denise Hardy. Thank you for joining me, Denise.
Well, you're welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Where are you talking? I can see you're in a clinical environment. Whereabouts are you today?
I'm in a very small clinical room in a hospice in Cumbria, St John's Hospice in Lancaster, which is one of our satellite clinics. So it's a really small room, but it has everything that we need. And of course, in these COVID times, it means that I can only see just one person in here with me at the time. So that cuts out family members and carers perhaps who might want to learn about lymphedema, but it is what it is, and it suits us, and it means that people who are within this catchment can see us in their more local area, as opposed to having to travel to Kendal, which is probably about 30 odd miles away from here. So it just means that people get a more local service at hand for them.
Very good, very good. Well, I will credit you with that. You pretty much introduced me to more in-depth lymphedema. We were just talking about it 9 years ago, which I do struggle to believe, but right at the start of PhysiQuip, you and I met and kind of took us on that journey. So thank you for that introduction on there.
Yes, yes, I think I've introduced you to quite a few people over the years. But it's been a good journey. I can't believe it's 9 years either. It's incredible, really.
It really is crazy. So really, I'm just really keen to hear more about you and your journey, because I know we've never really spoken about that previously. So where are you actually from originally?
Well, I'm a Yorkshire lass originally, but most of my married life was in the Midlands, in Lichfield. And that's where I really started my lymphedema journey, way back in 1984 was when I first came across lymphedema. My children, I had two of my children then, and I was starting back on a twilight shift at a hospice palliative care unit, and the very first shift that I had to do was to help people to bed, just settle them down for the night. And at the handover, the nurse in charge said to me that I was to be looking after a lady who had breast cancer. She was sadly dying from her breast cancer. But as an aside, she said that this lady had lymphedema. And I said, "What's lymphedema?" I'd never heard of it before. And she said, "Oh, you'll soon find out." And of course, that was, quite intriguing, but it was absolutely devastating when I did find out what it was. And this lady was dying from her breast cancer, but it was the lymphedema that was causing her the biggest distress, really. And if you can think, this is going way back, so 1984, what's that? That's nearly 30, is it 30 years? I don't know, whatever it is, but we didn't treat lymphedema then. And I can remember this is my first shift at the hospice, and I said, wow, what are we going to do? How are we going to help her? And I remember us actually setting up a drip stand and putting a bandage to hold her arm up so that we could help it to drain. And she was given diuretics. And of course, as we now know today, those two things were of very little benefit. And that woman died with a very, very complex, very advancing lymphedema. And we did nothing at all to help her. And of course, that was one of many patients that I saw come through the hospice because we had no idea how to treat it. And then one day, as I'd been there a year or two by then, we were starting to do courses at the hospice called Care of the Dying course. And part of the course, you had to do a project. And one of the students who came to the hospice, her project was lymphedema. And I thought, lymphedema. And I just remember seeing this young girl give her presentation, and she had been in contact with somebody called Caroline Badger. And I don't know whether you remember that name at all, but she actually is one of the founder members of the British Lymphology Society. Well, she did found it, and she worked alongside Peter Mortimer and Robert Twycross. And so she was actually fundamental in starting lymphedema in the UK. And this young girl had worked with her and sort of, learned a little bit about lymphedema. And of course, I was like, whoa, lymphedema, we don't do anything with patients with lymphedema here. And so on her project, I sort of started to learn about it too. And I learned that actually there were a few clinics at that point around the country. There was a clinic in Oxford, and there was a clinic at the Royal Marsden, and there was a clinic in Newcastle. So I went to visit them and to see what they did to help their patients with lymphedema. And gradually, I began to learn more about it and read more about it. And because of Caroline and Professor Mortimer, they set up, it was called BLIG then, the British Lymphology Interest Group. They set up that group for people who were wanting to learn more about it. And I joined way back then. And just gradually over the years, I built up my expertise. So I sort of started really at the very, very start of lymphedema management in the UK. So I was really lucky. It was at a time when it was just starting to come into being, really. Nobody knew about it. And I mean, I can remember learning to bandage, and I had a handout that Caroline Badger had put together. And I was reading this handout and trying to do it, because nobody would show you, then nobody knew how to do it at all. I had no instruction, no training. And I remember I was on night duty, and the first gentleman that I bandaged, I bandaged his toes and his leg, because he'd got advanced prostate cancer. And all night long, I kept lifting the bedclothes to see if his toes were still on his leg, because I was terrified that I'd bandaged too tightly. So it's been a huge learning curve, but it's been so exciting because, nobody knew about it. I just learned so much. And gradually, I sort of just learned more and more and more, as much as I could, until I finally thought, we need to run a clinic. We need to start addressing this properly. And I applied for some money. I won an award. And that allowed me to look at setting up a clinic. And that's what I did I think we opened, I think it was about 1994, I think. I can't quite remember now.
Is this Kendal?
No, that was in Lichfield still.
Right.
So it was literally just a little clinic. I did a parachute jump to raise money. I fell out of an aeroplane and did a parachute jump and raised £4,000. 2,000 went to my clinic and 2,000 went to BLS. We started the clinic from there, and very quickly that clinic just expanded. Until the hospice decided that they would do fundraising, and by 1998 we had a purpose-built lymphedema clinic. And we were seeing 125 patients a week.
Wow.
So it had gone from seeing just a few people to suddenly having this big clinic. And it was amazing. Gareth Southgate opened it. So I've got a picture of me with him and the rest of the team. And yeah, it was just a phenomenal thing to be part of. So I stayed there and left in 2001. Sadly, my husband died, and I just decided that I needed a change of direction, change of scenery, change of life, really. And I moved to the Lake District. And coming here, I realised, again, there was very little provision for lymphedema, particularly non-cancer patients. And so I thought, well, I need a job. I need to start doing something here. So that's when I set up Kendal Lymphology Centre. So that opened in 2005, primarily on the back of just, a few patients that I knew needed care. And again, just like the previous clinic, it grew like topsy. And we now see, I've got a team of 6, and we have about 500 ongoing patients at any one time. We've seen, I think, in total about 3,500 patients since we opened. So yeah, it's been really successful. Pardon?
That is amazing. So how would these centres then, so you get initial funding, but who was paying that once you've got that initial funding?
When I worked at the hospice, because it was a hospice that was charitably run, you just literally, you just told them what you were doing, and people were just so, they couldn't quite believe that you were making such a difference to people's quality of life. And so the money just kept pouring in. So it was just through charitable donations. And remember, in those days, none of the items were available on prescription. So you had to have a budget. I mean, I can remember having a storeroom full of compression garments because you had to purchase them. You couldn't get them. You couldn't prescribe them. So it was literally charitable money that ran the clinic. Whereas when I moved to Kendal, it was a totally different kettle of fish. Things were available on prescription, and I opened with no budget, with no funding at all. I had no garments in stock at all. So it's changed considerably over the years in regard to how we provide care, and to the better. It means that it's open to far more people than it ever was before. But equally, funding, keeping the clinic going is much, much more difficult. And I have to beg, steal and borrow money wherever I can. But basically, I'm a provider now for the health service. And I have contracts in place to the hospital trust, who set a budget for cancer patients to be seen, and the CCG, who allow me to see non-cancer patients. But it's an uphill battle. Every 2 years, I have to go back to them and tell them what we've done and how we've done it. And hope against hope that they will keep that contract going, and that they will continue to give us money to keep seeing our patients. Not easy.
No, it is stressful. I mean, from your, as a person then, have you always had that drive to do things? Like, I just wanted to go back to a point you mentioned before about you going to visit the clinics in London and London and Newcastle and so on. Was that something that you were asked to do from the clinic you were in? Did you have to ask their permission? Did you get funded for it? How did those things happen?
It was an interest that I had, obviously. And as I say, I basically won some money to allow me to do that. I said, look, if I did a feasibility study, if I could prove to the Council of Management, or the Board of Trustees as it was, if I can prove to you that there is a need for this type of service, will you consider funding the service? And they said, yes, of course, but you've got to show us that, that we need that service. And so I won some money. It was called the Elizabeth Clark Charitable Trust Award. And I got 500 quid. And it meant that I could go around the country and see the clinics that were up and running. And so, as I say, that was there were the 3 clinics that I visited, with the Marsden, the one in Oxford, Sobel House, and the one in Newcastle. And on the back of that, I was able to put some sort of draft figures together about how much it would potentially cost to see people. And fortunately, because I was very, I suppose, persuasive, the Board of Trustees agreed, and they agreed to fund a position for me to open a service within the hospice. At first, it was just for cancer patients, but I soon learned that there were lots and lots of people who developed lymphedema without cancer. And that became then quite a passionate thing for me to do, because a hospice, generally, they only see cancer patients. But to me, people who had lymphedema without a cancer diagnosis had a much poorer quality of life. They didn't have any help. They didn't have any support from Macmillan nurses or the like. So to me, they needed more help. And fortunately, I was able to convince the board that we should treat those as well. I remember going to a board meeting and them saying to me, Denise, why should we have a clinic for people without cancer? And I was prepared for that. And I asked my husband at the time, one of my patients that I saw, she had a leg swelling that was 28 litres bigger than her other leg. And I thought, what could I use that weighed 28 litres? And my husband found a 5-man tent in the loft, and it was equivalent to that volume of fluid. And I strapped it to one of the trustee's legs and asked him to walk around and to sit with this tent on his leg, which is a bit bizarre, but equally it made them realise that a patient who has that amount of fluid in their legs, it's difficult and their quality of life is awful. And so they thought, actually, these people do need help. And it was great. Yeah, they were really supportive. And as I say, on the back of that, we were able to fundraise and get a purpose-built clinic, which was opened, as I say, in 1998. So yeah, it was great. So yeah, I don't have any sort of business sense at all. I'm rubbish at that, absolutely rubbish. And setting up the clinic has been a huge learning curve, absolute huge. Yeah, it's not been easy at all, but equally, where there's a will, there's a way, I think.
I think with a load of those things, I mean, again, I can speak from my experience. I didn't realise half the thing, more than half the things. When you set up a business, you learn a lot of it going on the way. But you obviously have got immense drive to do these things and to even set that thing up when you're relatively young when you were doing that. How did the rest of management, so you were already in a nursing job and then you want to create this lymphedema clinic setup. Are they supportive of that? Do they see the benefit, or they've got other priorities, or how do they respond, your managers?
When I was at the hospice, it was just convincing them that it was I mean, because it was the first lymphedema clinic, the first purpose-built lymphedema clinic, it gave the hospice kudos. So, they was like, yeah, bring it on. It's great. We're doing something that nobody else has done. And they were up for it. But of course, now I'm completely independent. I set the money up. I set the clinic up using my own funds. Nobody helped me to do that. I just knew that it was something that needed to be done. And sadly, nobody else was going to do it. So I'm not going to lie. I make a living out of it. I have to. But equally, I help a lot of people and I employ 5 of the members of my team. So it's a win-win situation, really. But again, it's not easy.
No, absolutely. Just while you mentioned that point, when you're recruiting people to come and work in your setup, then what are the things that you're particularly looking for?
I want somebody who's got a passion for what we do. Somebody who's got an interest in the field, somebody who's empathetic, somebody who I know will see that patient through from beginning to end, somebody who will engage with them, somebody who'll not just come in and do their day job and go home and that's it. It's somebody who will just embrace it and be as passionate about it as I am. That's what I'm looking for, really. And I have to say I get them because we don't have any turnover, really. We've got somebody on maternity leave at the moment, but I'm hoping she'll come back very soon. So people, and I think also, lymphedema is a great thing to be part of. You see such fantastic results just by giving the treatment that we do. Their quality of life improves no end. And who doesn't want to be involved in that? Who doesn't want to be a part of that? It's phenomenal if you can help somebody. If you can see some, like for example, the woman I said with 28 litres extra in her leg, she couldn't get shoes to fit. She couldn't get normal clothes to wear. Can you imagine the difference it makes to be able to put shoes on again, or to be able to walk, or take the dog out and things like that we take for granted? Some people can't do those things. I treated a young girl at one point who wanted to wear Wellingtons, who'd never been able to wear those before. Somebody who wanted to knit again. People all have different objectives that they want from their treatment, and you can make that happen. And that's a huge privilege to be part of somebody's life and to be able to help them in that way. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, on another thing that you introduced us to is lipedema, and that's something which you're really pushing as well. Talk to me how you got involved in that area.
I think, again, when I was working in the hospice, and of course I had very, very little experience in those days, I treated a patient who I now know had lymphedema, but I didn't know that then. And so she had the usual cornerstones of care. We were bandaging her, we were doing skin care, exercise and lymph drainage. And I didn't see any change at all in her leg shape or size. And I couldn't understand it. Didn't get it at all. And then, of course, a few years down the line, the light bulb went on and it was, it's lymphedema. That's why it's not responding to the usual methods. Because if I could reduce fat by bandaging them, I'd be a very rich lady. I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I suddenly realized that there were two very different conditions. And again, it's one of those conditions that is very different to lymphedema, but is often confused with it. And I just tried to learn as much as I could about it. And sadly, unfortunately, you know, there isn't a cure for lipedema. I don't get the same results that I do with my lymphedema patients because, as I say, you can't move fat. It's there already. It worsens if a person puts weight on, then so too will the lipedema. So my goal is to try and get people as soon as we possibly can. Early referral is what we need to do, and therefore education is so important, because unless doctors and healthcare professionals know about it, then literally all they're going to say to their patients is go away and exercise. And of course it won't respond to that, really. So it's about encouraging people to adopt a healthy lifestyle. Yes, to exercise, because exercise is so important, but not to diet, to eat healthily. And if we can get people to that way of thinking, then their lipedema will remain stable and won't worsen. But for those women, unfortunately, who had lipedema many years ago, if we get them now with their legs in that very large state, there's very little that we can do to help them, apart from, of course, support them and to provide appropriate compression garments, help and advice in any which way we can, but we're not going to make that fat go away. And that's unfortunate, but that's why education for lipedema is so very, very important. So much to do. So, yeah.
And how do you feel the state of that education and understanding from GPs or whoever it is that should have this awareness? Where do you think we're at with that?
It's early days. It's early days. And the likes of Lymphoedema UK, of course, are phenomenal in helping with that. There are courses for GPs to go on through the Royal College of GPs, which helps. But they've got such a lot to do, of course. But there's so much that we can do. That they can do, that other healthcare professionals can do, but we've just got to get the knowledge out there. And of course, the difficulty at the moment is COVID. You know, we're not able to do much in the way of training, but hopefully that will change. And next year, perhaps we can do far more in regard to that. But definitely, lipedema is something that does need to be addressed and addressed appropriately. So I'm working now with the European Lipedema Forum, and that's been quite exciting, working with all the medics and the healthcare professionals around the world, really, who are involved in that. So that's been really, really good to be involved and see what they do and how they can deal with it and treat it and manage it successfully, hopefully, in the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You always seem to be, you're very involved with a lot of the governing bodies, whether it's ALS, you know, Lymphoedema UK, LSN. Like how important do you think it is to be supporting that? Because you obviously doing your day job, but that's a lot of the time is extracurricular sides. How important do you see that as your work?
That's a big part of what I do, really. In fact, literally just before I was speaking to you in my lunch hour, where I'm working with the LSN on a project at the moment, and I was just reviewing a document that we're putting together then. So yeah, it's important to me. The Lymphedema Support Network I've been involved with for a long time. I'm their nurse advisor and a trustee for the charity, and I love it. It's, to me, they've been phenomenal in what they've done for people with lymphedema in this country. The literature that they put out, the fact sheets that we have are just brilliant. And they're a huge support for patients in the UK. And the trustees that run that charity, Anita Wallace, of course, being the chair, are just phenomenal. They put so much effort into running it. It's just been a pleasure and a privilege to be involved with them. So yes, I'll continue to do that for as long as I can, really. And the BLS, yes, so, as I say, I was involved in it used to be called BLIG, the British Lymphology Interest Group, right from the very get-go, really. And that's how I got to know Caroline Badger and Professor Mortimer, who I've worked with closely over the years, of course. I started off helping doing their newsletter, was co-chair about 2001, I think, with Jane Wigg. And yeah, have been a member ever since and helped them wherever I can. Part of the children's interest group as well. So yeah, I think it's important to play a part in those things. Being a professional is important to try and learn as much as you can, and also to educate others. And those are ways to do that. Being part of those groups enable you to network and to share ideas and to learn from each other. So yeah, they're phenomenal and really, really important projects to be involved with. If you've got any spare time, it is really, really good to try and help them, I think. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it if you're able to spare some time to work with one or two of those charities.
And then how do you see that fitting in with the other, these things, equivalents probably going on in a lot of other countries? How closely do those organisations work on an international stage?
Well, the International Lymphedema Framework, of course, tends to sort of bring all those things together. I think certainly the Lymphedema Support Network and probably LIP UK, they literally work within the confines of the UK. And I think that's quite right, really, because, you know, the UK is very different to other countries. We don't have a lot of the insurance that, say, the States have and things like that. So every country runs very differently, and the ILF have shown that in what they do. So I think although they might speak to each other at different conferences, I think they are quite separate at the moment, and perhaps that needs to be, because we are also very different. But you learn so much from going to those things, and if you're able to get to a conference that's in a different country, it is a fantastic way to learn about how other countries deal with lymphedema and lipedema. We can learn from them as well. So yeah, I think it's great to be involved, but I think what our charities are doing at the moment by sticking with the UK is probably the right way to do it, because that's, how we work. I mean, even, Wales, Scotland and England and Northern Ireland, we all work differently, don't we? So, that's just us four. So imagine what it's like with the rest of the world. So yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. It does. You've actually, that's a really good point, because that's one of the things that I've always wondered in terms of like Wales, Northern Ireland. They're almost self-contained in terms of that, because is that because of they're smaller and they can be sort of managed more centrally?
Yes, and different pots of money, different ways that it's funded, etc. So we're also different, and that's the problem. You can't. What we do here is so and also even within England, really, it's still a postcode lottery, isn't it, as to who or not gets lymphedema treatment. So the parts of the south that don't have any lymphedema management, parts of the northeast. I get patients coming privately to my clinic because they haven't got a service anywhere near them, and that's sad. That's pretty sad, isn't it, when you've got to travel hundreds of miles to see somebody because there's nowhere more local to be seen. So yeah, it's still a postcode lottery, despite me being around for all those years. Some of it's improved, some of it, it's incredible how we've moved on. And then I look and I think, actually, nothing's changed at all. So there's still lots to do in all aspects of our work, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll continue to do that anyway. In terms of like people, who are the people that you've come across, whether it's in lymphedema or in other areas, that you've been inspired by, or you just think, wow, they are an impressive person? Are there any people? I'm sure there's a lot of people, but are there any particular ones that you could mention?
Well, I think I've already mentioned Caroline Badger, who nobody seems to talk about her much anymore. And she literally is the one that got us all into lymphedema. And for me, she's the one that she still inspires me. I see I've got books written by her. She gave me a copy of her dissertation many years ago. And, it's just, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And there'll be a lot of other lymphedema therapists who wouldn't. So she's definitely one. Then you've got Prof Mortimer, of course. He's the patron of BLS and many other charities, including the LSN. And again, he was influential in getting things moving off the ground. But it's not just about those types of people who are influential. It's about just those who I work with, for example, who are so phenomenal in the ethos, the work ethos that they give, and what they give to our patients. Always willing to learn, and that's crucial, really. It's wanting to do better for your patient, wanting to do what you can to improve quality of life. So I think those of us who are in lymphedema, we have that sort of that attitude. It seems to me that, you know, they really want to do that. And yeah, it's strange, but there's so many people that I've come across over the years that I would like to emulate and strive to. But I think on the top of my list, it would definitely be Caroline Badger. She's the one that for me stands out, but unfortunately decided to leave, and she actually became a nun. So I'm not going to follow her in that, but yeah, so yeah, that would be mine.
Oh yeah, no, very interesting. And you've talked about a lot of this now, but where do you see lymphedema going like this? Like you say, we're still struggling for funding in different areas. You've got Kendal Lymphology Centre, you're on your secondment, to some extent doing your COVID injections, which is another thing that you've added into it. But where do you see things going to from a lymphedema management perspective?
To me, it's still a worry, because, you know, if I just take my patch as an example, yes, we've got a fantastic service. I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of it because, you know, it was my baby, I suppose, and we now see, you know, seeing thousands of patients. We've got 500 patients on the books. But if I wasn't here, I fear who would do it. There's nobody in the community. We don't do training and education because they're so busy doing other things. And I just worry how it will be inherited. Who will keep on doing it? I just don't know. I don't know how it will pan out, because there's no investment in lymphedema at the moment. It's such a struggle, and yet it's so necessary for cancer and non-cancer patients alike. We have lots and lots to do, and it scares the hell out of me, really, because, you know, I'm ready for retirement almost, and I just don't know who will take over my clinic, who will want to keep it going. So if there's anybody out there who would like to take over a lymphedema service in the Lake District, which is phenomenally beautiful, feel free to give me a call, because I'd be very happy to speak to you. I didn't realise that I'd be able to do that today. That's a fantastic opportunity, isn't it?
I will make sure I put that clip out in public, so no problem.
Yeah, but seriously, it is a worry, because, you know, for my patch, lymphedema, nobody does lymphedema in the hospital. Nobody knows how to bandage anymore. Compression is, you know, dire if you look at it in regard to who provides it, and whether it fits or not is, you know, it's a nonsense. So it is a huge concern to me. I'm just hoping against hope that one of my team will be wanting to take it on in the future, or somebody else who come forward to do it. But yeah, it's a huge concern, because the NHS at the moment, particularly around here, has no interest in it whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that is a real shame. It is a real shame. And I think you can see your passion for this area. So I definitely will make that clip public, because it's a very good thing to come out of today. But no, I know you've got more patients coming in now, so a massive thank you for not only giving your time here, but again, you've been great for us over the years with supporting on things and always speaking with us. So we thank you for all of the energy, which must be very draining going through everything that you've done. But yeah.
No, it's a pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly catch up soon.
Very much so. Thank you, Denise. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.